Castle. It's my great pleasure to make some introductions today. But first, I want to acknowledge on our behalves that we're meeting on the lands of the Wabakul and Worimi nations, traditional custodians of where we're gathering today. I also want to acknowledge, I'm not sure where to look, the traditional custodians of the lands from where folks might be zooming in from today. We must recognise that First Nations sovereignty was never ceded, and that this always was and always will be Aboriginal lands, stolen lands. I want to acknowledge on our behalves the elders, past, present and emerging, and also Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues with us today and also online. And as we gather to remember that we're surrounded by and sustained by, indeed constituted by, country. One of the guests we have today will be sharing research, actually looking at the way in which internationalisation discourses are operating to marginalise Indigenous knowledges on the African continent, indeed. And given the events in Australia in recent weeks and around the world, I think these are urgent questions becoming ever more urgent. And so the folks I have the pleasure of introducing are Dr. Gifty Gyamera and Professor Penny Jane Burke. Penny and Gifty met in the context of Gifty commencing a PhD at Roehampton University with Penny as her supervisor. They've been working together for many years, including as founding members of the International Network for Gender, Social Justice and Praxis, including the development of a feminist collective in Ghana, working to confront some of the multidimensional inequalities being navigated by academic women in careers in Ghana. Professor Burke, in addition to being Global Innovation Chair of Equity and Director of CIHI at the University of Newcastle, was recently appointed UNESCO Chair in Equity and Social Justice in Higher Education. And Gifty is a key partner in the program of work associated with the Chair and is here in Newcastle as part of planning different the development of projects in different Ghanaian sites. And so it's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Gifty Gyamera and Professor Penny Jane Burke in conversation with Miss Julia Shaw. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Matt. I'm going to start by asking a couple of questions and then more questions of Gifty and Penny. So as Matt was saying, you met because Penny was your supervisor, Gifty, and that was, I think, 14 years ago. So we know how you met. That was a spoiler, Matt. But can you talk us about how you met and how that's contributed to you being able to sustain this amazing relationship over so many years?
All right, so thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much, for Penny and this exciting question. Penny and I met, in fact, my first encounter was about 14 years ago, in 2009, when I visited England. And I was discussing with a friend the possibility of pursuing my PhD in a university in London. Because I've had a very bad experience in the Netherlands. I will go back to that later. So he introduced me to a school or a University of Roehampton. Well, so I went through the website. Then I went to the School of Education, the website, and then I saw the profile of Professor Penny Jane Burke. And I really was interested in her area of interest that also really resonates with my interest. So I quickly sent her a mail and she immediately responded. And I said, oh, wow, this is just amazing. And she immediately invited me to his office the following day. So I went there and there was that instant connection. There was that instant sense of, that warm feeling, sort of. And so we discussed about my topic. She expressed interest, and then that moment from there, we decided to work on my proposal. And then we processed the application, and then in some few months, I enrolled at the University of Roehampton, London. Yeah, and as I enrolled, actually we had a very, very beautiful relationship, because you see, when we are talking about supervisor-supervisee relationship, normally there are some complexities here and there, particularly when there's sort of interracial relationship. But Professor Jane Burke really, helped me and really portrayed and developed that sense of trust, that sense of openness, that sense of belonging, which was quite, encouraging to me, because I had a bad experience, as I said, in the Netherlands. And when I went to the Netherlands, that's where I started my PhD program, I think in 2008. And talking about the neoliberal and the neo-colonial ideologies. You see, because with the neoliberalism, most universities have really, they have planned, or they have this idea of sort of, marketizing their programs, particularly using some sort of strategies to exploit international students. So I was sort of lured with a beautiful packaged program to the Netherlands, because, well, I thought I should do my PhD in a Western country because I had all my education in Ghana, and I thought there should be some sort of experience outside. So I came without knowing much about the context. But when I came, I realized that something was really, really wrong. And I tried to find some sort of support, but there was no one. And I met with the director of the program. And I remember very well, his approach and his interaction was just weird, was something else. So I was confiding to one of my colleagues over there. I said, "Oh no, I was really sure he would not be able to help you, because, that man, in fact, he used that word, that man is a pure racist." So just imagine, and I was the only Black, and I really felt that something was wrong. And my university had sponsored me, to undertake that program. And then, here I was, there was no supervisor, there was no one to talk to and others, and the director was also not able to help. So when I came to England and I went to Professor Park's office, and that she had that sense of warmth and everything, I was still a bit, sort of suspicious and sort of uncertain. Yeah, very suspicious and uncertain. But he was able to, at the end of the day, able to, remove that sense, to have that sense of openness. And another thing that really, connected me with Professor Jane Burke was the ability to help me to really, because when I started, they really pushed me to read about the history of higher education in Ghana. And when I started reading, I was exposed to many of the things positive things about Africa, let me put it that way. Because all this while, I have my Ghanaian friends there, but our educational system did not really highlight those, because many of the educational system, in fact, our textbooks, our theories, the sort of teaching, everything emphasized the West. So you are trained to be sort of alienated from your own society and your own community. And our programs and everything also highlights the West and the colonial legacies, which we have accepted as the norm, as the fact, right? Something that is not challenged. So when I was asked to, read something about the history of African higher educational system, because I was looking at a higher educational system in Africa, then as I was reading, I got to know a lot about positive things about Africa. I said, oh, did this really happen, about our indigenous system, about all those things? And I will always say that is what my PhD program really helped me, is the program that really enhanced my confidence as an African and my confidence in African knowledge systems. And I always say that I wasn't surprised that most of the, let's say, the nationalists that really fought for our independence, they had a sort of encounter maybe in the West, sort of. Because it's strange that when you are there, you are not able to. But when I came, I was at Roehampton, they were able to push me. Then when I was, I realized these things and I was like discussing. So it was strange to me. So I was discussing with my friends, my colleagues, not the PhD or students at Roehampton, my friends. There were 3 questions, there were 3 stages. So the first stage is, Gift, are you sure what you're saying is true? Sort of. Are you sure? Because some of the things about, that were said about Africa, the negatives you have been, pushed to believe was totally different from what I was reading. Yeah, totally different. I remember there was one thing, for instance, that indicated that at the point in time, Africa, some of the countries were at par. Before the initial encounter with Europeans, it was at par with some European countries. England, how could I believe this? And it was, but very real. And so it's like, even what you're saying, if it is true, what will? So actually they were doubting me. But even if it is true, what can we do about it? And then the next stage is, okay. So they will be at that stage for quite a long time. Then, okay, then the interest will, you'll have the interest, okay, what can we do and all that. But even in terms of me pursuing that or using theories like relating to decolonial and post-colonial and, the Africanization theories in my work, even that, people were very uncertain. So what they were saying is, Gifty, are you sure? How can you are being supervised by a white person and you're going to use theories that debunk Western theories? Or that, that punch holes or debunk Western hegemony? No, you will never pass your PhD. Something that everybody was telling me. You are being supervised. And even if they do, what are you going to do with Africanization? What is it? You will never get promotion and you will never even have a church, you will never, get a church, whatever. So they said a lot. But then when I confided in my supervisor, so at the point I decided not to. So when I confided in Penny, and then there was another professor, Professor Susie Harris, said, Gifty, this is so, I was discouraged, so I wanted to do away with the theories. They said, no, you have to now question your assumptions. Now you have to question. Now this is the time to do critical thinking. Try to, ask questions. So they really, really encouraged me. They really, really encouraged me, and I became more excited about the work and move the work forward. So with the idea, knowing that, my supervisors are open, they are very transparent, they are very trustworthy. They are not marginalizing me or as an African or the African indigenous. That was something that really energized and then strengthened my relationship or our relationship. So I think that is, for now, that is what I would say. Yeah.
Penny, would you like to reflect briefly on?
I'll just briefly say, well, I remember the day that we first met, actually. And it was just such a joy and pleasure to work with Gifty over the years that she was doing her PhD. I feel like I learned a lot from Gifty as well. And, I really started to understand, for example, the way that these discourses, these global, discourses of higher education around internationalization were working in such insidious ways to conceal neo-colonial processes that, through these supposedly neutral kind of positions around internationalization, which seem like a really good thing, these processes that Gifty is talking about become so entrenched in the imaginary in terms of thinking about, histories of oppression and what higher education can, engaging with processes of doctoral study can or cannot conceal these processes. And so, I think what Gifty is pointing to are the multiple practices of higher education in which these subtle processes of neocolonialism are sustained. whether that's through the supervisory processes or through the ways in which we understand what is researchable, what kinds of questions we can ask, but also the kind of overarching discourses. And I noticed that internationalization is a really dominant discourse at the moment amongst the UNESCO community in a different kind of way. But I think, what Gifty's work really challenges us to do is to keep interrogating how we're engaging with these kinds of discourses, what they're concealing, and what relations of oppression and inequality they're covering up. Yes, I think the other thing I wanted to say about working with Gifty on a more personal level was the astonishing way that she had encountered so many challenges. And I think maybe you'll talk in a moment about the challenges that you negotiated in your field work. But her kind of determination to keep going was really impressive and amazing. And that's not to sort of just sort of individualize this and say, wow, she's so resilient. She is resilient. But I think, it does show that when we adopt counter-hegemonic practices, that we can actually, together, and I think that this is a story about collective action, working together, collaboration, to be able to negotiate these really uncomfortable and sometimes dangerous situations that Gifty was negotiating as she did her PhD. And despite all of that, she always responded so carefully to, I think, Susie and I's advice and turned things around, And I think you were talking earlier to me about how there was a moment where towards the end, after these kinds of provocations about your the reading that you were doing, that you were starting to take out and remove some of those theoretical, those post-colonial theoretical insights, because you became worried and concerned that somehow that was going to undermine your capacity to complete your thesis. And I think this is another really important moment of thinking about the kinds of advice that researchers get about, the way that we conduct ourselves in our research, this idea that, first of all, you should only have up-to-date contemporary references. This is something that I was talking to Tina about yesterday, actually, which again takes away all of the depth of the doctoral process in which you're engaging with. You can then be engaging with these histories and these incredible bodies of work that provide the insight to be able to critique and interrogate the contemporary timescapes in which we're navigating around higher education. So, I think the story is really one of working together and collaborating, but also, Gifty, I think you need to tell the story of some of the things that you encountered along the way. So I'll just hand over.
So one thing that I even left that also is very important, the fact that, Penny allowed me to, that sense of freedom, let me put it that way, that sense of freedom. And, why am I saying this? When my interest was in another area in higher education, not on gender. And she tried to compel me, sort of encourage me to move into gender. I said no. Because I thought I wasn't interested in, this idea of gender is being overhyped and, all those kind of things. And, she tried. Exposed me to a lot of research on gender in Africa and all that, but I still tried to move away, but she still allowed me to. But when I went to the field, that is where my interest in gender, started. Because I had so many challenges. And, the first was about the entranced sociocultural demands. Because as Mbiti has indicated, in Africa, your major role now, you have one role and nothing else, is to be a mother and to give birth. But this is the case, I went to the field and I wasn't married. I mean, at least they should know that I have a ring, and this is also one of the new colonial thing, because I mean, you must have this, sort of ring, which is so reflective of Western, yeah. So the male academics, anytime I entered, their office, the first thing is, are you married? I mean, do you have children? And so if you're not married, what are you doing this work for? In fact, one head of department asked me, in fact, the essence of, the legitimacy of my work. Because he said education is about children, but if you are not giving birth, what are you doing it for? Right. And then I also, in fact, the ideas still did not even strike me very well till I came, after the field work, and I was, looking at the data. And I realized, because I was looking at senior management and then some academics, and I realized that in all the 3 big universities, I had only one woman as a head of department. I did not, and I think I would have had 2 other women, because we now had the first, we had now had the first vice chancellor, female vice chancellor in the university, but she had traveled. And then there was another woman who was not even a Ghanaian, who was the director of international studies. So in actual, we had all these people. I had about almost 50 interviews, 48, and I had only 2 women. So in fact, I was trying to dodge or to push away these gender issues, but my first presentation was on gender in Spain. Because how could this be? And I really connected to my experiences. And then I look at the statistics, and it was amazing, the number of women who were professors, number of women who were, and this has even persisted up to this point. Because I was just looking at one statistics in one of the universities. It's amazing. The number of professors, the number of senior lecturers, and the number of associate professors, even now. Right? So, I mean, these challenges and ideas really pushed me. So whilst I was still emphasizing the internationalization aspects and the idea of colonization, the gender was because they were really connected. Because one important thing about internationalization as well that I was looking at the impacts of internationalization on the curriculum. And you realize that even in the universities as institutions of higher learning, instead of we maybe challenging the colonial legacies, we were still entrenching it in the name of internationalization and globalization, which has been argued that they are still forms of colonization. I mean, because when you look at slavery, which followed closely, colonization followed closely to slavery. Then we have this concept of development after colonization, because the concept of development also tend to reinforce the ideas about colonization, because it was through the concept of development that we had this, like you are very developed, you are lower developed, you are less developed, because it's like the demarcation and the division came, and then we had this institution set up for us to move to become like the developed countries and all that. And after this, we have the internationalization and the globalization. So as one author indicated, we have the globalizers and the globalizees, just as the colonizers and colonized. So now the globalization and the internationalization, I also realized that we're even, worsening the little, or whatever the little gains that we have been able to achieve or attain after independence. Because now the universities want to internationally position or reposition themselves. And what must they do? They must, because in order to position themselves, then they must behave, they must be very loyal to Western hegemony. Because then our indigenous knowledge systems, as they told me earlier, doesn't count, right? Because right now, we have to expand our curriculum because we need to position ourselves, we need to attract international students, we need to generate money. So then it means that the curriculum must be very attractive. And if the curriculum must be attractive, then we must push away the indigenous knowledge systems, right? So right now, our curriculum, we were inviting Western experts to come and tell us what to do. So the universities had to embark on a lot of reforms, but then the reforms were advised by Western experts. So a Western expert will come and spend just a week or 2 days, 2 weeks, no, less than about a week maximum to tell you what you must do. And then the curriculum you must also, get from the West and everything. And as one vice chancellor kept saying, if Harvard is coming, then we must be like Harvard. And you ask the question, how can we be like Harvard? Instead of we creating our own, so it's really re-emphasize, or reinforce the, colonial ideologies, which of course also enhance the neoliberal ideologies and connected to gender. Because, yeah.
On that note, Gifty, could you and Penny share about the next, I guess, further down the road in your work together and the Ghana Feminist Collective, Ghanaian Feminist Collective, and how you were aiming to challenge that? I'll leave it to both of you to say.
You go.
Okay, so, well, after all this, quickly going to that, then as I developed more interest in just gender ideologies and became very aware of this neoliberal impact and all that, we're thinking of what we can do to really change the situation now. Well, we cannot change, but at least have some impact, because we realize that most of the challenges, in fact, one key thing that came out through my experiences and the data that came up and, everything, emphasize the entrenched challenges of academics in Ghanaian higher education, but more particularly, challenges confronting women. So we look at how we can address in our own way, because we realize that, praxis, as we know, indicate that research must not just be for its own sake, but must have some practical impact, So we decided to have a way to have, and it started a conversation about the gender. We had a network, and even before that also, Penny also, we had a conversation that he, decided that we take our relationship even further. So, because the supervisor relationship should not even end there. So she discussed with him that she will continue to be my mentor and all that, learning from each other. So we decided, the two of us, what can we do? So Penny brought her this idea about a network that is being formed, and then I became a member of it. And then through, I think our first project, though we had a pilot that was, like individually funded, but later we through CIHI, and the vice chancellor.
The Office of the Vice Chancellor,
yeah. And the university, we had this project to embark on a project. That was a small scale project at the initial stages. There were just about 14 participants. And the idea is we tried to keep it short, small, because we wanted to foster that sense of belonging. That sense of closeness, that sense of intimacy. In fact, the issues are so many that I know that at times I don't see, but you see, one other thing, I realize, even looking at the challenges of women, is the individualization, the sense of isolation, the sense of shame. A lot of things that were happening to, the female academics, because as they have to keep up with the men, as well as keep to their, their divine duties or divine role, the traditional rule, because you have to be a mother and you have to have your children. And you don't have to be just a wife and mother, but you have to be a very good one at that. So the women have to combine this and combine that. Because if you are not doing that, it means that you are not, your academic, this will not be recognized, as was done to me. So we look at what we can do for this woman. So we had this funding, and then we organized this small scale project for women. So though it was just a small scale, we tried to, expand it sort of. So we involved about 5 universities. So we had 5 universities, in 2 regions, Greater Accra and the Central Region. It involved both public and private institutions. And then we have women from all the levels, so professors, senior lecturers, those who are married, those who are single, students. So we have, women from diverse groups. And we decided to, host this in a scenic, a very relaxed space. And there were some, major reasons to that effect, because we wanted the women to at least move away from the neoliberal spaces, that is the universities where they don't have any, sort of reason to even breathe or to do any reflection. And also to, try to project the value that each one of them, has or we place on them. So we had this, and we preceded before the methodology, we used actual letter writing, but even before that, we went to we did a presentation on neoliberal ideologies and its impacts. Because what I realized is that nobody was challenging that concept. In fact, it has not been conceptualized. It's like, this is how it is. This is how it is. No one challenged. There was no voice challenging the neoliberal ideologies. In terms of its demands on academics, in terms of its impact on the curriculum, no one. So we had to expose, the few, because they are not in the they are not in the gender, area or something. Yeah. Yeah. So we also had to expose them to some feminist theories and all that. And, it really had a lot of really impact. And after that, we used the writing methodology, which was also to challenge the masculine way of, the traditional way of, doing things. And we had a real impact that we had, but I don't know whether Penny will read, did a presentation, the things that they said at the end of the day, how they really evaluated the program was just amazing. They really had that sense of belonging. They were able to, collectively, we were able to interrogate the intersected challenges confronting women. Then collectively, we were also able to, reimagine the possibilities, the possibilities to address the challenges. And you see, and everything was a collective thing, because we realized that now the challenges confronting women are so deep-seated that it's difficult for an individual to challenge. And in spite of the fact that you're a woman, you are also, have to play a lot of other roles, you challenging it has also got to do with your sense of esteem or yourself, because it's about ego. Well, the neoliberal demands also come with it with a sense of ego, a sense of shame, a sense of, so when you complain, it's like you are lazy, you are hardworking, because about meritocracy, this person has been able to do it, so why don't you shut up and complain? And then you just complain. So realize that even before the workshop, when they were asked them to write their ideas, after the neoliberal presentations and all that, you see, realize that they were still talking about the neoliberal, projecting neoliberal expectations, hardworking. Okay, it is there, but if you are hardworking, you'll be able to, you just have to accept the status quo. You have to be determined, you have to persevere, you have to do this, you have to do that. It's something that they really thought that. But after the workshop, you go, oh my goodness, so this is how it is. All right, this is, I have to rethink gender, political activism. This is a reawakening. So it's reawakening their consciousness to challenge the taking for granted assumptions, right? So they were so happy and an eye-opener, and then almost all of them, expressed the interest for us to really, move forward with this program. Because it wasn't something that happens every time. And many of them, that sense of shame that they had, is it that I'm not working hard? But then when we collectively explore, they realize that, so this is not happening to only me. It's happening to other people. And they were so amazed. So after that, we were thinking of how next to expand the program. And again, through the office of the Vice Chancellor and the CE, we were able to have some funding to, go on with the writing and mentorship program, which, of course, as we try to also address these issues, we are still the neoliberal, so we also have to talk about the writing and others. So it's, we decided to move with this program, and then each and every one participant was paired with a mentor in Australia. In fact, it looked a bit tricky because one might think that why is it that everybody the Ghana, has a mentor in, Australia. Then it will be like a hierarchical something. No, but the idea, in fact, this time we did not even involve the senior officers or senior academics. The previous ones had senior academics, but this one we did not. The writing and mentoring program, we involved only the early career and the mid-career. And then most of the mentors in Australia were senior academics. Again, we wanted to look at how this gender inequality and others play out in different contexts, right? We wanted to see how they play out different contexts. So we look at it that way. And then it's also something that really had a lot of impact and then took it forward. And I think through that, we even have Ernestina here. So I think.
I think that brings us to looking at Ernestina, the UNESCO chair and what the plans for this work are under the UNESCO chair. So I'm not sure, Penny and you, Gifty, want to touch on that? So.
Yeah, thank you. So we also have on the slides there some of the reflections from the letters in the earlier iterations of the workshops that we had. Gifty and I, together with the women who participated, which we call the Ghanaian Feminist Collective, wrote reflections of the letters, the extracts of the letters to kind of pull out the threads. And I suppose the point of all of this is, again, to bring, to generate knowledge together through learning together about our different experiences across different contexts, but to understand as well. Can you just go back a slide or two, one slide more? That should actually say the intersections of patriarchy and neoliberalism. So really trying to pull out these contradictory experiences that we have as women. We initiated all of this through letter writing because we thought this would be a wonderful way to articulate our commitment to collective praxis. So the idea that the letters could both enable us to express our personal experiences with each other, but also our engagement with the materials and how that was bringing new insights into our understanding of our personal experiences, and then trying to analyze those together in our workshops across the different letters as well, to bring out some of these contradictory experiences where sometimes neoliberalism can afford opportunities. And it feels good, it feels like this is actually progressing my career, because within this kind of framework, I can actually learn the rules of the game. I can master the rules of individualism. I can learn how to demonstrate and perform these kinds of resiliencies that can be recognized, and so on. And interestingly, that first quote there from one of the letters really kind of shows these contradictory discourses that, actually these expectations in the family and these long lists of chores that were expected to be done actually really prepared well for the neoliberal university. So, a valuable resource in progressing your career. Very interesting. And then another participant talks about how, progressing through seemed to be, in alignment with the expectations of the neoliberal university, but actually in the center of the Gender Development Center, she was being called Madame Gender in this really kind of derogatory way. So she was excluded from most meetings, courses outside, and denied entitlements. And she says femininity is marginalized, underestimated, undermined. But, the center was making a lot of money. So these contradictions about the expectations of neoliberalism and income generation being able to prove these and demonstrate these kinds of productive performatives don't always mean that you're recognized as being the right kind of person in those situations. Anyway, we wrote a paper drawing on these things. I don't have time to actually go into all of that, but if you're interested, we can circulate the paper. So Julia, you asked where to now?
Yeah,
So now we've had various different iterations of the program. As Gifty says, that has been really impactful for many different members of the group. Tina, who is on the right of that slide, hello Tina, is here with us. So she was one of the participants on one of the more recent iterations of the program and has now taken up one of the UNESCO chair studentships and just arrived last month, I think. It's been almost a month or about a month to undertake her PhD here. So that's really exciting. But really the UNESCO chair partnership, I mean, it's quite incredible when you think that we met 14 years ago and here we are together as partners for the UNESCO chair in equity, social justice, and higher education, really thinking about how can we progress gender equality, which has been our commitment together for a long time now, and also thinking about reducing inequalities, access to quality education, and the relationship of patriarchy and gender inequality to neocolonialism and neoliberalism. We've been trying to show that these forces are, intersecting in really complicated ways, and that we need to look at these structural forces that are often invisibilized by these broader kind of hegemonic discourses and practices around things like internationalization, which seem to be not so harmful until you take a deeper look. So we've been together now here, and we're having Gifty here to progress our next plans, and it's all quite exciting. So one of the things that the UNESCO chair is working around is trying to bring attention to the impact of, gender injustice manifests in gender-based violence. The United Nations women call this the shadow pandemic. It's a social problem of epidemic proportions, but is completely invisibilized in the space of higher education. And we've been working for the last couple of years at Newcastle to progress a research agenda to bring to light the impact of gender-based violence on access to higher education and also on participation in higher education. And as a result of that work and the incredible insights of the student victim survivor participants who have such important knowledge and experience to bring to the university's understanding of how it can progress a deeper agenda around gender equality. Not one that just counts number of women in particular positions, which of course we do need to pay attention to, but also to the cultural, environments that perpetuate in really insidious ways these kinds of injustices that are then disregarded or very difficult to articulate unless you do that collectively, as Gifty has said. So through the insights of the student victim survivors, we are progressing the development of a gender justice through higher education hub, working really closely with our community partners, which we have some here, which is wonderful, and trying to work together with the university being on an equal partnership with a whole range of local and regional agencies to think about what services, resources, opportunities, pathways exist that enable us to help victim survivors to thrive through access to tertiary education, but also through building that capacity, how the university can also contribute to challenging gender-based violence and to building gender equality. So Gifty and I have been talking about ways to extend that work into Ghana and also to build on the co-mentoring program to embed a focus on gender-based violence. And maybe I hand over to you to kind of reflect on what the next steps are.
So thank you very much, Penny. So, the work of the UNESCO chair is very interesting, very important, and is very timely. Because when you look at even my own experiences, right from my experience in the Netherlands, through Roehampton, and even now as an academic, realize that this idea of neoliberalism, neocolonization, neo-patriarch system, and its impact on higher education and its connection to gender-based violence is just, real. Now, most of the things that our experience I had in the Netherlands, in a way, has got to do with, as I said, neo-colonial ideologies and sort of gender-based violence, because what we are talking about recently, some statistics in Ghana indicate that in terms of gender-based violence, the prevalent gender-based violence is the emotional abuse. Emotional abuse, we hardly talk about. And its impact on access, because, for instance, with my experience in Netherlands, it was sort of an abuse, seriously, it was. Because I stopped the program and stayed at home for, almost a year before I now, enrolled, came to London. And I had to do that on, I don't know whether it's on faith or something, because, I had, my university sponsored me, but I had used that word, let me use that word, I had squandered the money. Wasted the money in the Netherlands. It's a huge amount of money. Huge amount of money. And wasted, and I had to stop. Now imagine when I came to Roehampton, probably I had met maybe similar supervisors or similar environment. Of course, I wouldn't have had that access. And then when I went to, in terms of, even collecting the data, how the harassment about, why you are doing this, why you do that, would have also even discouraged me. Because then it's all about your participation. Because it reached a point, and I also had some, sort of health issues that if I didn't take care, would also affect the very thing that they were talking about, childbirth and all that. So the idea is, do you continue or do you stop? Because it reached a time when I really had to decide whether I now had to continue or had to now satisfy the traditional demands. But through that encouragement and all that, I was able to, pursue. And then even as an academic, there have been a lot of, experiences. And when we met with our collective interrogation, collective experiences, collective, thinking about possibilities and others, you realize that, gender-based violence is serious, but it has still got that sense of shame, because when you're talking about academics, how can you still, discuss about, what your husband is doing or is not doing? And there were issues where, one of participants, he is in the same university with her husband, and she has a lot of issues. For instance, when she has a doctorate, the husband has a doctorate, but they refuse to, in a formal, sense, acknowledge her as a doctor. So when they are mentioning her name in formal settings, they will add doctor to her husband's name, and then they will call her Mrs. And when she insists that they should add a doctor, it becomes an issue. It's like, because it's about, and all these are sort of psychological and sort of emotional thing. So gender-based violence is a very important aspect. And so with the UNESCO chair, it's a very, we are very happy to have that, or take that research in the universities. We are looking at the universities because gender-based violence actually is a discourse, nationally, it has not become a serious national discourse, though there have been some, research and some engagements by maybe governmental and non-governmental NGOs. And the government has also done some, or embarked on some few strategies and, sort of or develop some framework and policies to, really address that. We realize there's a lot of work to be done. And when we come to higher education, it appears to be almost non-existent. I've been going through their reports, the university report and others. There's hardly any mention on gender-based violence. And what is being said is normally maybe sexual harassment. And even sexual harassment, I think in 2019 or 2020 also, there was this expose by the BBC where there was this issue about sex for grade. And realized that, this lady involved had a lot of backlash from the society. Even in the academia, even where the women, even female academics, were not sympathetic. To the extent that, one of my colleagues who is always happy to talk about that, to condemn, this what we call sexual harassment. He said, Gifty, come and see. Even the committee for the director for sexual harassment committee even came to sort of say that probably the man didn't, you cannot imagine, but all these are probably to also support senior management to make sure that the university is not. And the person involved at the end of the day, is even, attaining higher sort of positions even and becoming more even recognized. Right. So in the higher education, it's a series. So after that expose, there were some few research here and there, but it's like individual sort of. And it was only that year that the universities, the sexual harassment thing appeared in their reports where maybe they organized some training for maybe committee members of the sexual harassment, or maybe the school associations, the student associations did some training. Other than that, it's actually non-existent. But sexual harassment is becoming sexual harassment and gender-based violence in broader, sense is actually becoming an issue. Where recently in Ghana, we've had a lot of issues, even in the society, where some, people are even to the extent of killing their wives. It doesn't happen every now and then, but at least when it starts, it continues up to some point and then stops, and then it will start again. So people go to a lot of gender, but it's not something that you have. So this, opportunity, schedule opportunity will really help us to really undertake this research in higher education and connect it to access. Because even where we are embarking on gender-based violence programs in society, we hardly connect it to access in higher education. You see, why we don't also emphasize the issues in higher education is the fact that's my observation, that we have in our society, we hardly, I don't know about it, but we hardly sympathize with victims of sexual harassment. We only sympathize if maybe you are from age maybe 14 down or something. At that one, we know that you didn't have any control. Or maybe if it's stranger rape or something, maybe armed robbers came to your place or you were attacked. But for you to come, no one will really. So let alone someone in higher education, and we hardly connect it to any access. So it's something that is really, really important. And then again, what is also unique about the program that I'm interested in, the fact that it is not only about the women, but men too. We are looking at gender-based violence because the men also complain, males that, we always sideline, women always sideline them, but they are also going through a lot. Probably to even have to change the criminal code in Ghana, who knows? Because in our Ghanaian criminal code, men cannot be raped. So probably this research, if they're able to participate, then they will come out and then probably it can change policy, because in our criminal system, men are not here. So it's a very important program. And then another interesting aspect is the mentorship program, where, we are using to develop, we use it to develop a professional hub to address many of these issues. And we are going to.
I'm sorry, Gifty, we're running out of time.
All right, so I'm ending. So this mentoring program will be a non-hierarchical, like co-mentoring space.
Non-hierarchical.
Okay, yeah. So non-hierarchical. So, and we'll be able to like bring women from different spheres, different, areas. For instance, we have someone as a director of parliament, maybe from different, fields coming together, so that we can see what we can do to address some of these issues.
And it's been so exciting working alongside you and Penny this week as we've been talking about the next steps of the project. So I'm afraid we are really close to time. So I don't know if you want to sort of say any concluding remarks, and then there'll be a chance to check questions.
I just want to say also that on this last slide, this photograph is with the 3 UNESCO chair studentships. So that's Luz, Shay, and Tina, and Gifty and myself. But it's much, much bigger than this. So I just want to acknowledge everybody in the Center of Excellence for Equity in Higher Education, CEHE team, and all of our community partners, all of the women who've participated on the peer mentoring program over the years, and so many others. So I just wanted to acknowledge that it's a much broader community than that photograph portrays. But it's very exciting to be able to work together over these last few weeks. So I'll end there and say thank you to everybody as well for being here to be part of this conversation.
And there's cheese and biscuits outside.